Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FCC Task Force Educational Webinar. Thank you, Caroline, for this amazing music. And I'm just upbeat now. Thank you. I'm excited to see many familiar faces and names, and thanks for joining. And we have three excellent speakers lined up. So let's start our webinar on time. This webinar is in conjunction with the California Perinatal Quality Care Collaborative, called CPQCC. As a part of the Post Improvement Palooza, Ashwini, Courtney, and Janine from CPQCC Educational Committee will share their Post Improvement Palooza activity at the end. Next slide. So I will introduce myself. I'm Malati, Stanford neonatologist, spearheading this FFCC task force, along with my co-chair, Colby, a neonatologist from University of Rochester, and Carolyn, CPQCC program manager, is a program manager for this task force as well. And Carolyn is keeping us all well organized, and she formatted this slide deck for today's webinar. And I don't know what I would do without you, Carolyn. Thank you for doing this. And we are so thrilled to be here. Next slide. This slide acknowledges a few of our partners helping us build this FCC community. And thank you for that support. And next slide. So our agenda is listed on this slide, and we will share our task force and small group QI update briefly, followed by CPQCC Family Advisory Council update, and then speaker's presentation, but then we end with the question and answer session. Question and answer session will be moderated by CPQCC Educational Committee Chair Ashwini and Associate Director of Quality, Courtney. Please post your questions in the chat, and if we can get your answer during this talk, and we will try our best to gather the responses from our family partners and speakers, so share them with you all in our listserv. And next slide. This slide shows our journey so far and our aim statement. And as you can read, our aim is to educate and create guidelines and facilitate unit-based FCC interventions in the NICU. We started the task force work in November of 2021 by recruiting passionate providers and family partners. In phase 2, we created a networking opportunities for NICUs interested in FCC. Primary challenge with the FCC is changing the mindset of the healthcare providers to view families as an essential part of the healthcare team. So we are doing these educational webinars. So today's webinar is the third out of 8 webinar series, and we share the recording widely on our social media platforms and share it on our listserv. And you will hear more about this from Caroline about our Padlet link. So if you are interested, wants to share this information with your staff, you can feel free to share the recording. And phase 3 is we are facilitating 5 small groups centers to build the Family Centered Care Committee and Family Partnership Council. Next slide. To promote family-centered care, we must partner with families from the program inception. So this slide shows our 15 amazing family partners, and we are adding more into our family partner list, which is fantastic. And I'm so excited and so honored to work with partner with all of those family partners. Next slide. This slide shows our new executive council members, and Emily is a neonatologist. She's co-leading group 4, and Lori is a chief executive officer of Sinova Associates Advancing Nurse Leadership community. And we have Elizabeth and Morgan. They are family partner for small group 1 and 3. And thank you for joining our task force, and welcome. Next slide. So we have 2 subcommittees so far. So our newsletter committee led by Vargabi. And so we plan to publish a quarterly newsletter focusing on the latest FCC publication and family partners expert insights. This is a screenshot of our inaugural newsletter dedicated to our family partner speakers and their expert insights. We share this with our listserv members, and we will post the link in the chat too. So those words are very powerful. So please share them with your bedside providers to change the unit culture. Next slide. Another subcommittee is a communication and marketing, and Daphna is the chair, and she's spearheading the Twitter communication. This is the screenshot of our Twitter page, and follow us on Twitter if you are on Twitter, and so we can expand our mission. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, phase 3 focuses on facilitating the center to build FCC committee and family partnership council. This slide is busy. I'm not expecting you to read this, but this slide shows the name of 34 centers and members who committed to making a change. I appreciate their commitment. They filled out the baseline 20-question context survey. I will share 2 questions results pertinent to today's talk. We want to ask you all the same 2 questions by poll. So the poll will show up on your Zoom window. You can answer the questions, and we will share the results before the speaker's presentation. Thank you for doing that. So the next slide, and this slide shows our first question of the Pareto chart, shows that y-axis is the number of responses, and x-axis shows the answers to whether they have a family-centered care committee or not in their unit. So we have 34 centers responded to this survey, and 17 out of 34, they don't have any family-centered care committee. And 12, they have some, they have a committee, but it's somewhat active, and there's a way for them to improve. And 5, they have a very active FCC committee. We define the FCC committee as a multidisciplinary team participating from family partners and staff nurses and therapists and physicians. Next slide, please. This slide shows our second question is that this Pareto chart shows that y-axis is number of responses and x-axis is their answers. And as you can see, 14 out of 34 centers that do not have a family partnership council, and 13, they have family partnership council. It's somewhat active. There's room for improvement. And 4, they have a very active family partnership council, which is great. Next slide, please. So based on our survey responses, we created our SMART aims for the small group. So this slide shows our SMART aims. So we wanted to increase the percentage of NICUs who have a very active family-centered care committee and very active family partnership council. Next slide, please. We asked them about what the barriers are to implementing the family-centered care committee. And they can choose multiple options. That's why you have more responses here, like 198 responses. So the top barrier listed here is lack of staff time, and followed by culture change and lack of parents' presence at the bedside. So we hope to remove the culture change barriers through this webinar. So that's our goal of having this every other month webinars. Thank you. Next slide. So we have a fantastic team of neonatologists and family partners leading the small groups and helping the team to build FCC and Family Partnership Council. Next slide. So we are so thankful for their commitment, and without their help, we won't be able to initiate this project. Thank you. And next slide. Also, I want to thank our QA mentors for their advice in our QA collaborative work. And now I will hand over the virtual mic to Carolyn for her to share her CPQCC work and task force members. Thank you.
Thanks, Malati. We are so excited that we have over 300 people who are now part of this task force listserv, and those folks represent over 90 different hospitals. This is extremely exciting. We've gained a lot of momentum over the past couple of months for this work. So thank you for sharing those emails and links. We really appreciate it. And we're excited to see so many of you here today. In case you were interested in past webinar resources or future webinar topics, you can scan that QR code right there. I'll also drop the link in the chat. So this is a link to our Padlet. So this is your sort of, go-to spot for all the different recordings, for some notes, for some transcripts. That's in the chat as well, if you prefer that. Malati also asked me to talk about an initiative that the California Perinatal Quality Care Collaborative, CPQCC, that we are working on as well. So as some of you may be aware, only a third of California NICUs have a family advisory or family partnership council, and less than that actually formally involve families in their QI work, despite all of the developmental outcomes that we know depend on family involvement and the abilities of families to really shape structures and systems of care for infants. So with that knowledge in mind, we are really excited to say that we are launching a statewide family advisory council for CPQCC that will not only advise our activities for QI, for research and data, but that we also hope will act as a catalyst for that local NICU family advisory council and family partnership work. Because California is such a diverse state, we really want to represent that in our council in terms of language of preference, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic factors. That's a really critical factor for us in this venture. We also hope that this group will curate. There's a lot of good resources like this webinar already out there, but to curate it and create some educational resources for NICUs. How do you get started? How do you sustain membership? How do you support family advisory council members? Because it's a long-term game. It's not just a one and done project. We're excited to also offer mini grants to California NICUs if financial burdens are the biggest barrier to get this project started. We know $5,000 isn't a lot in the scheme of things, but maybe it'll help you be able to compensate your family members for their expertise, to provide dinner at meetings, to get some initiatives off the ground, to really get this going, because we believe in the impact that a family advisory or a family partnership council can have. So that's where we are with that, and we're really excited to get that going. The chair of the Family Advisory Council for CPQCC is also a family partner in this task force, Michelle Wrench, and so we are thrilled to have her with us. I'm going to pass it over to Colby to talk about the poll results.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. In true family-centered style, I am quarantining at home with 2 toddlers, and so my apologies in advance if they join the Zoom call at all, or if you hear Disney Plus in the background. But I'm Colby Day. I'm a neonatologist. There it is. Neonatologist in Rochester, New York, and really excited about the work that's been done already and the things that are coming forward next. We have our poll results from the questions that were asked of you guys. I don't know if you're able to see them yet, but it looks like we've had about 77% of the people on the call answer, which is fantastic. Sorry, Caroline, do you want to take over for a moment? I'm so sorry.
Sure, no problem, Colby. So it looks like about 50% of you have a family advisory or family partnership council, which is amazing. And 8% of you are in the process of getting that going, so congratulations. And then a little bit less, 30%, 37% of you have a family-centered care committee that's sort of a multidisciplinary committee, right? And 14% are in the process of establishing that. So thank you for that. Yeah, we are excited to move on to the speaker portion. And we do want to dedicate today's webinar to the NICU children of our speakers, Sophia, Max, and Grace. Colby?
Yes, I'm back. We've got our Disney Plus fixed in the background. Sorry. So I am very excited to introduce Marybeth Fry. I know Marybeth well from Vaughn. She's fantastic. She is the NICU Family Care Coordinator at Akron Children's Hospital in Ohio. In her role, she mentors and coordinates programming to support current NICU families. Additionally, she serves on a number of unit and hospital-based committees as the parent voice in her quality improvement projects. Marybeth is the Vermont Oxford Network faculty as the lead family partner of their iNICU and NICU collaboratives and experience-based co-design program. Please join me in welcoming Marybeth.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. I guess good morning also on the West Coast. So sorry for that. I'm in Ohio, so Eastern for me. I'm Marybeth Fry, and I am going to be one of our 3 speakers today talking about creating and strengthening your family advisory and partnership councils in the NICU. Molly and I were consulting just a little bit when we saw each other at the Vermont for Network conference this last week. So, there may be some repetition in our presentations, certainly because we're all doing similar work, but at all different sites. So please take away whatever it is that you can that's beneficial to you as you're doing this work at your own sites. And I will just say next slide, correct? Or am I able to do that? I'll just say next slide. Excellent, thank you. So just a little bit about my site and where we're located. So I am with Akron Children's Hospital in Akron, Ohio. We are level 4 regional transport NICU and a freestanding children's hospital. So I do find that makes us a little bit unique sometimes in the work that we do regarding patients and families, because all the babies that we treat here in our unit have mamas who are at other sites at the time of their initial admission. We are a 75-bed single patient room unit that is divided on 2 floors and 3 wings. So in that photo right there, we are the top 2 floors, floors 7 and 6, and we do have 3 wings on those 2 floors. So we are quite spread out, although we are a lean site. So believe it or not, from a flow standpoint, we're doing better than we have before. But our patient population does include premature and sick newborn babies, as well as babies who require any of our surgical services, and NAS or eat, sleep, and console treatments. So we do have 2 other local SCNs. We have another 6 sites within our region that are considered to be Akron Children's Hospital NICUs or SCNs. And then we also do take care of babies who are born anywhere within the region that may not have SCNs or NICUs close to them. Next slide, please. So, I share all that information demographically with you because some of our patients come from, an hour to 2 hours away, which sometimes can create challenges for families as they come to stay with their babies here in our unit. This is a picture of one of our single patient rooms. And I am the NICU family care coordinator here. So I have the good fortune to be able to support programming with families who are here with their babies. I did start that work as a volunteer back in 2009. My NICU experience was actually back in 2004. So some of you may be thinking, oh, wow, that's 17 years. You're right. I have a high school senior this year. That was 17 years ago when my actual NICU experience occurred. How do I stay relevant? Believe it or not, and I'm sure you'll hear this from others as we continue our webinar today, that experience never leaves you, but the pain and the trauma of the experience heals a bit so that you're able to help other families as they continue the journey. So I did start as a volunteer and honestly didn't start until 2 years after I had my term baby, my son, who helped me to realize what a traumatic experience I had in the NICU. And it really also propelled me to want to help other families and support them. So over time, that volunteerism did become a paid parent position here in my unit as the NICU family care coordinator and the lead of our NICU based family advisory council. And I share that information because you'll see there are those of us who work in paid roles and those of us who work in volunteer positions. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of really pushing and furthering that paid position just for consistency. Volunteers are phenomenal folks, phenomenal, generous folks who offer their time to make the experience better for families, who make the outcomes better for physicians and families both, but it's just so important to really push for that consistency that can come with a paid position. Next slide, please. So at Akron Children's, our Family Advisory Partnership Council is set up in this structure, this umbrella, I will say. So we do have a hospital-wide FAC that is across all departments within our children's hospital. And then underneath that umbrella of our Family Advisory Council, we have smaller FACs. And a FACT is a family action collaborative team. So that is a unit-based council. So in NICU, we are very fortunate to have that. Our pediatric ICU and our hematology units both have that as well. So over time, there have been ebb and flows of other units having these FACTs, but over time, at this point, we just have the 3. Next slide, please. So our NICU fact. So our NICU fact, we are really fortunate in the NICU that this has been a longstanding group that was formed in 2005 by a group of really motivated NICU graduate families. And that came together. They had their NICU experiences over time, and they came together in collaboration with our larger FAC and our parent mentor coordinator so that they could create a hospital-based group. So again, at that time, they worked really hard as volunteers with the parent mentor coordinator to establish this group. So at the time, they have kind of taken on different roles. So some in our NICU fact are volunteers just specifically for that team, while others are also parent mentors. So, and within that structure, we typically had a hospital employee point person who was kind of the go-between for our volunteer NICU fact group and our quality improvement group in the NICU. Our NICU fact does still at this time report to our larger hospital-wide FAC. And those volunteers have participated in the Vermont Oxford Network over time with Akron Children's, which is great because again, Akron Children's has seen over time the commitment from Vermont Oxford Network to parents as partners in care. Next slide, please. Thanks. So, you know, again, I share that timeline, that really brief timeline with you because the NICU fact has had, you know, a very long-standing timeline of establishment. And along with that comes a lot of opportunities for projects and advancement. And, you know, we will also talk a bit about the ebb and flow that comes with having a long-standing committee, right? So over time, at the very inception of the group, there was a great deal of motivation and excitement over supporting families. At the time, we were a 59-bed pod style unit. So, you know, we've been 6 years in our current space of 75 single patient bed rooms. So, you know, those changes over time have affected our family population as well as our FAC. We have had, again, financial support from the March of Dimes at one time. We no longer have that. We now rely on donor funds and assistance from our capital budget. So again, that timeline and the changes that occur with it, it's impactful. We have and we do review and develop educational materials that go out to families. We do continue to try to have those celebration and support dinners. We'll talk about COVID in a little bit because that definitely had an impact on some of the work that we've done. And we do a lot of encouragement of these folks being mentors. We are really fortunate at Akron Children's to have an online parent mentor model. So if you were to go to our Akron Children's Hospital website, you could go under our volunteer tab and find a list of all our parent mentors that are available to families. We do find that it's a really nice way for families to reach out and get the support that they need at any given time, as opposed to going through a coordinator and so on. So all the parent mentor profiles are on and available online. So we do really encourage a lot of our FAC members to become parent mentors as well. That way we can encourage group and individual mentorship, face-to-face phone calls and email communication. Again, COVID has had a bit of impact on that because some of our parent mentors are not vaccinated, and currently we require all volunteers to be vaccinated if they're going to come to the hospital. That said, it's just kind of propelled us to make sure that we're using other modes of communication, such as phone calls, email, and online platforms. Next slide. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the challenges and solutions to maintaining an FAC in the unit. So families and growing and changing and relocating over time. As I said, this group was formed back in 2005. So, you know, many of the founding members of our group are no longer involved because, as you all know, the NICU experience grows and changes, and that ebb and flow over time. Your volunteer time may be, you know, repurposed from providing feedback to NICU to serving on PTOs at elementary school to, coaching on teams as children get older. So changes in families over time can affect your FAC. So it's really important to have active and ongoing recruitment and really clear terms of service. I think that's really important for families to know as they're signing up for an FAC, what exactly are they signing up for? What is the duration of time that they're going to be serving? Is it a year? Is it, 3 years? How do those cycles work with your FACs? And, who is going off and who is coming on to your FAC, so that you constantly have that nice pool of folks who can help your unit. And again, terms of service, what is involved in your FAC? Are folks going to be required to come into in-person meetings? Is it going to be an online platform? Are they going to be reviewing and developing education? What are the QI needs of the team? So all those things are really important to be upfront with families as they're signing up. Leadership changes can be a big impact to FACs, when you're looking at whether it's your physician leads, any of your provider leads, even your nursing leads, and how well is your FAC ingrained in the hospital culture, so that when those leadership changes occur, the FAC remains and the continuation of communication occurs. And parent participation can be meaningful still in projects. Sometimes with leadership changes, perspectives change. And it's just still really important for your FAC to continue to have meaningful quality improvement projects to participate in. As folks are volunteering their time, it's important for them to be able to see the impact that they're making in the unit, so that they have that satisfaction and they know that their time is well spent in helping families. That's really what they're there for. COVID, can't say enough, unfortunately, of the impact that COVID has had on everything with regard to families as partners and family-centered care. That said, I think it's also been a real opportunity for us to be able to leverage online platforms to continue the work. There are some FACs who were wonderfully, just transitioned wonderfully from being in person to being online. They were able to offer support to families online. And that was really important. And I think, again, over time and whatever the lasting impact of COVID is on your institution, it's really important to just continue to use that online platform to continue the work and engaging families in the work. Honestly, for families who may have, kiddos at home with long-term needs, or even just recently transitioned home kiddos that they're not really wanting to take out in public, this is a great opportunity to leverage technology to continue your work. Next slide. And recruitment, a lot of times people will ask, well, how do you recruit? Or I will often hear in work with families as partners, well, I can't get families to participate in an FAC or in quality improvement. They're just not interested. I respectfully disagree. I promise, there is always a family that is out there that wants to make the experience better for the next family. It's on us to make sure that we are extending the offer to engage them in that care. So I challenge all of you, talk to your bedside staff, those frontline folks who are there day in and day out with families. They can be your point people, and they can give you a list of people that, hey, I think this particular family might be really awesome for your quality improvement, or for your mentorship, or for your family support work. Please tap into your bedside staff for, recruitment ideas. Going to events and things like that. Make sure you set up a table about your unit FAC at the family. Goodness, well, it feels like a family, right? At your NICU reunions, at your fundraisers, at any of your events that you have for your hospital. Make sure that there is a NICU FAC table set up, so that families can say, hey, this is a great way that I could give back to the unit. And also make sure that you're promoting the work of your FAC within your unit, so that when those FAC members come back, they can see and experience the impact of that work, as well as current families who can say, oh, wow, my hospital team is getting family feedback. This is awesome. They're doing work with families, not for families. And this may be a way that I can give back in the future. This is also key. I have to say, please make sure and please work really hard to ensure that the membership of your FAC is reflective of your unit. I will be very transparent and say we have yet to crack that nut. It's a hard nut to crack. We do have a patient population where we have a lot of families who are single parent families who may not have, additional support at homes to take care of children, to come to meetings that are present. So it's up to us to continue to recruit families using that online technology, as I said. But again, I know that we particularly need to be better as far as representing and putting that lens of equity on and making sure that, our FAC is not just a bunch of middle-class white women who are able to participate in volunteering. We need to really reach out to our other family members who have incredible insights in the work that we do and that are very much needed to have those voices. And I think that is all that I have. I'm going to turn it over to Molly Faust-Wylie.
Thank you so much for that talk, Marybeth. It's my pleasure to introduce Molly Faust-Wylie, who is a NICU parent and a NICU family program manager at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. As a direct result of her experience both on bed rest for 6 weeks with her son to being in the NICU with her premature infant, Molly believes in the importance of community support and shared experience for NICU families. Molly provides a unique parent voice on multidisciplinary teams with the aim of improving the overall experience for families with infants in the hospital. Molly is the chair of the Family Advisory Leadership Committee for the Neonatal Quality Improvement Collaborative of Massachusetts Family Engagement Collaborative and serves as a board advisor to Project Sweet Peas, a national nonprofit that supports families of hospitalized infants and those who've been affected by pregnancy and infant loss. Please join me in welcoming Molly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here and to be presenting alongside two amazing NICU parents. I wanted to say it's NICU Awareness Month, so I know that we probably have a lot of NICU nurses on this call, and today it happens to be NICU Nurses Day, so thank you for all that you do. You change lives every single day, and so many of us think of you every single day when we look at our children and we honor our children. So thank you all so much. Oh, hold on, my slides aren't advancing. There we go. Here's my contact information. I'm Molly. I'm a former NICU parent, and now I work in NICU advocacy. This is my contact information, and I'll also have it at the end of my slides as well. I always like to center my talk around why I'm here. This is my son, Max. This is the very first time I met him. He was born at 32 weeks after I was on bed rest for 6 weeks at the BIDMC NICU in Boston. And I always like to use this photo because I don't remember this photo being taken at all, but a very amazing nurse told my husband to take this picture. And on my son's first birthday, my husband gave it to me. And I just love that look at that smile on me. And I finally got to touch him. I didn't get to hold him for quite some time, but this was a really, this photo means the world to me. So I always like to share it. And here's some pictures of us during our NICU stay doing skin to skin, my husband doing skin to skin, and of course, making our way out the NICU doors. And Max now is 9.5. He's in 4th grade. He's healthy. He's doing beautifully. He's the big brother to a younger brother, Renzo. But our NICU experience changed our lives. And I work with families like ours now to try and make the experience a little gentler. So I always like to center our talk around our NICU family advisory and NICU family engagement around philosophy of care. So in my unit, several years ago, right before the pandemic, we came up with a philosophy of care. And I actually heard about philosophies of care through similar QI networks like this one. So ours was co-created by NICU families for NICU families. And the goal is to just really show our parents our commitment to them being a part of the care team. So our philosophy of care reads, welcome to the Klarman Family NICU. Your family is part of the care team. Here we value families and all the love and knowledge they bring and support the uniqueness of all families and cultures. So the BI is a 63-bed level 3 NICU in Boston. We are not a surgical unit. Our rooms are semi-private. We have a main unit, and then we have a step-down special care unit as well. And we are part of a networked hospital system. And we are sort of the main level 3, and we get outborn and retro transfers to about 7 different area hospitals. Our NICU Family Advisory Committee is about 25 members, and they inform all aspects of what we call our NICU Cares program. So I'm going to talk a bit about our NICU Cares program today and the work that I do with support of the NICU Family Advisory Committee, and talk a little bit more about sort of how those roles intersect. So we have a NICU Cares program. It's an acronym. It's incredible how much the NICU world loves acronyms. That's something that I've learned in my almost 8 years in this field. You guys really love acronyms. So of course, NICU Cares is an acronym, but these are some examples of the day-to-day work and what we do care about. So some of our alumni events, some of our support documents, the bereavement work and memorial service work, which is such an important piece of our NICU, sibling work. On the bottom, you'll see all sorts of brown bags, and this is sort of a painful reminder during the pandemic when our resources were very limited and we were not able to have our families in some of our shared family spaces. My coworker and I met very regularly to pack brown snack bags for our families so that they had a little nutrition and a little bit of, just a little bit of sugar, a little bit of salt so that they could, have help for that long day. And then some of the fun events we do, like photography. So our acronym stands for compassion, advocacy, respect, empathy, and support. But what does that really look like? It looks like remembering to celebrate all the little things that happen in the NICU, all these beautiful, incredible milestones for these families that we get to be a part of. We have front row seats to the best and the worst days of some of these families' lives. And it's really important to honor that. So our NICU Cares program was developed and coordinates social and informational programs, and it's meant to help families during their baby's hospitalization. But additionally, our NICU Cares program helps families connect with other parents during and after their hospital stay, and to stay in touch with us as a hospital. So we involve our parents during and after their NICU stay in a lot of different ways. This is just kind of one slide that shows all the different ways, but things from parents at rounds to our NICU Family Advisory Committee, NICU parents on our subcommittees, craft nights. We have an online support community for our NICU graduate families. We have different documents to help them be more involved in the day-to-day care of their infants. Not everybody is ready to be hands-on, and so it gives them some very focused things that they can do every day to help care for their infants. We have a family integrated care, FI-CARE curriculum and program on our special care unit that we're about to roll out to our main unit. A lot of us just came back from VON. We have ongoing and active VON collaboratives, and we typically have anywhere between 12 and 15 parent advisors. This year, I was the only parent who came, but in past years, we've brought some of our families with us to VON. We do one-to-one virtual and in-person support. We have a NICU app that is beautiful. We have a music therapy program that I'm very hopeful will restart. During the pandemic, of course, we had to get really creative and flexible about how we could engage our families. So through a donor program, we were able to secure some iPads and Kindles. We have a reading and literacy program. We have some support documents, alumni events, sibling supports. We have a beautiful meditation and relaxation program for our families through our pastoral care program. And of course, our bereavement and memorial service. So similarly to Marybeth's committee, I didn't realize they were the same year old, but we formed our NICU Family Advisory Committee in 2005. So our NICU Family Advisory Committee is the oldest patient and family advisory committee in our hospital at Beth Israel. And it was created to increase programs through our NICU Cares for families. It was also created based on our family satisfaction surveys. I'm sure all of you are collecting data and doing longitudinal, gathering of information about your patient family satisfaction. And so this was in direct response to some of the feedback that families there was a growing demand for parent involvement, right? Parents really wanted to give back. And thankfully to our amazing leadership team, there was a really high value placed on that unique parent perspective, and also a need for funding. So sort of the inception of our family advisory committee was about finding opportunities for grateful families to be philanthropic and to give back. And our Family Advisory Committee has grown substantially since 2005. We now have anywhere between 20 and 25 members who attend our meetings. And I want to highlight that one of the most significant things about our Family Advisory is we have 7 different bereaved families who also participate, which I think really speaks to the level of care that we're providing even in loss, that our families want to stay involved and stay connected and improve the hospital experience for families that come after them. So the mission of our NICU Family Advisory Council is to touch the lives of each NICU family in a positive and lasting way. Our goal is to complement the NICU's outstanding clinical care and embrace the hospital's commitment to family-centered care with programs and initiatives that acknowledge and support the family in the time of crisis, and to extend the relationship between the family and the hospital well beyond NICU discharge. So the NICU NFAC supports this mission through representative feedback on existing and future programming, facility and policy enhancements. This was most notable. We just went through a NICU redesign and renovation, staff and family relations, development, fundraising, and other issues related to the needs of NICU families. We also have 18 different subcommittees from our NICU leadership team. So we have 3 to 4 parents on most of our NICU subcommittees. So this is another way for our families to be involved if they're not able to join our advisory committee. We often find opportunities for them to join these sort of subcommittees, which are more like a roll up your sleeves working group type of opportunity. So they meet monthly, but we only ask our parents to join about 2 to 3 meetings. They're now virtual for the most part, or in person if they're able to, sort of in the before times. Generally, we start talking to parents about their involvement a year post-discharge, and we talk to all the staff who have worked with a family or who have been exposed to the family to see if they might be a great fit. So anywhere from their bedside team to their neonatologist, respiratory therapist, as well as their social workers to see if we think that it makes sense, and if we think that they might be ready, because certainly we're surfacing some complicated issues in some of these subcommittees and in some of our meetings, and it's delicate, and we want to make sure that we're not re-traumatizing our families, but also that we're, if they're ready to share their experience, and if they're able to take that expertise and that experience and to build better programming and to improve the lives of other NICU families. But how are we getting these folks involved? So that's sort of the meat of this, right? So we use a lot of different channels to connect with our families, everything from emails and phone calls. We have an alumni group online in Facebook we have a discharge nurse, a dedicated discharge nurse who calls families and specifically says like, hey, do you want to stay in touch? And then we're given those emails and we're able to communicate with our families and figure out which level of involvement they'd like to be. I'm in a paid family position. I know I've seen some questions in the chat about that, and I'd be happy to talk about that a bit more, but I'm a paid part-time hospital employed program manager within my hospital. So that's another way that I engage, because I'm able to be present at the bedside and build relationships with these families. So we cast a really wide net, because we know a lot of families will express interest, right? But things like a pandemic happen. And also we know as NICU providers that sometimes the NICU baby isn't the most critical thing happening in a family's life, right? There are so many different things that happen to our families at any given time. So we really want to figure out ways that we can engage our families, but not add to their burden. One of the things that I think is most effective, and when I went to give a similar talk at the Gravens conference earlier this year, if you don't have a stay in touch document or someone reaching out to your graduate families to check in and to see if they want to stay in touch, that's like a really low lift thing that you can do to help you understand what their interests are and also to what degree they want to be involved. If you're keeping something like that active and updated, and if you can find a way to just get in touch with your families and ask them if they want to stay in touch with you, that's a good starting point. we know that our families want to be really a part of things. They want to be involved in our QI work. Coming off of the heels of Vaughn, it's amazing to see what families can add to our quality improvement and to our advising. So, you're giving them a really great way to help future families and give back after their experience. But it's all about relationships, right? Because if we're inviting families to come back and to share in a vulnerable way, we really need to build trust and establish connections and relationships. So this starts at the bedside during their NICU stay, and it lasts for many, many years, or in some cases, a lifetime. Some of the members of our NICU Family Advisory Committee have children of the, have grandchildren who have children of their own. They've been sitting on our advisory committee since its inception more than 20 years ago. This is such a critical part of their lives, and it was such a touchstone for them that they want to be involved. They want to hear the way that, especially, some of our families who've been on our board for quite some time, the NICU has changed wildly. I know even for myself, my NICU stay was almost 10 years ago, and the way that that we provide care has dramatically changed. So it's really beautiful to see that, right? And to see how things are moving forward and how your feedback is being used. But in order to get that feedback, right, it's really important to have trust, and families need to feel safe in sharing the good and the bad about their NICU experiences. It's not easy to tell the people who have taken care of your infant that, everything is beautiful, but there were some things that could have been better. So when we're talking about, and then on the other side of it is when we're talking or disclosing clinical information to NICU families, sometimes it's really hard to hear about your child as a data point, right? Or when we talk about some of the more difficult topics, we need to make sure we're always using content warnings as they're appropriate. We always need to make sure that we're giving families a heads up if we're going to talk about something that may bring up some feelings and emotions for them. So we need to really think about the careful language that we're using in our NICU settings when we're bringing parents into this type of work. It's really important to talk to NICU staff and the nurses especially about what projects you've got going on, so they can see if they can think of any families that might be a good fit. And a lot of our families are still in touch with their day-to-day nurses, right? They are updating them, and now that they're home. So that's a great starting point. And then we also need to be really flexible. A lot of our working families may not be able to meet regularly at 12 noon. Zoom has been an incredible option for engaging families in sort of getting them involved in day to day, and sort of making sure that their once a month commitment isn't too much. Something that we're trying to do in our hospital, but we haven't much success, but I know that it works at other units, is some night meetings. Not everybody's able to meet during the day, but could you do, even if it's 1 or 2 night meetings a year, or night Zoom meetings, is that something that can happen? Also, are there opportunities for you to involve families over email or in a working group online? So just be flexible in the type of asks and be upfront about the ask. So what does the time commitment look like? What staff are going to be involved? Do you want to be forthcoming about that? And also, will they have a chance to connect with other NICU families, and do they want to do that? Compensate if you can. I know this is hard, right? Not a lot of our units even have a paid parent advisor role, but we need to be paying people for the time that they're giving us. And if you're writing a budget for a grant, or you're putting a grant proposal together, add some time for parent participation for their time and for their expertise. We're not currently compensating our NICU Family Advisory Committee, but we do offer them free parking and meals when they come in person for things. And for NICU projects like our co-creation of our family integrated care program, we had 2 co-leads who were NICU graduate families, and we offered them a stipend. Even if it's just some hospital swag, you really want to show your appreciation for the expertise and for the time commitment, because a lot of these things can be very time intensive. We know that it's really important to bring in all aspects of NICU families. So if you have families who are limited English proficiency, or who do not speak English, or are limited, using interpreters, having staff involved who speak those languages is really important to engaging those families. And then transportation. Some of you may have closer units, but we're a main level 3 unit, and some of our families live hours away, different states. So providing transportation, parking, childcare if possible, is really helpful. And we know, as Marybeth said, and I want to echo the importance, like we need to be recruiting in ways that represent and reflect our patient population. So we need to be prioritizing welcoming people from all different backgrounds. So race and ethnicity, but not only that, sexual orientation, family structures, gender, financial situations, physical and mental abilities, right? The experience of disabled parents is very different in a NICU. So are we doing what we can to listen to their experience, and also education level? Diversity in family structures. So are you engaging LGBTQIA headed families? Are you engaging single parents? And then cultural diversity. So again, families who are not speaking the dominant language in your unit, reaching out to them and finding ways to connect with them. We have some incredible family advisors in our Vaughn network who speak different languages. So it's always great to sort of tap an expert and see how they can help you engage. So, of course, one of the things we were asked to talk about was the impact of our family advisory and COVID and parent participation. And, you know, something that has sat with me, we, at the Gravens conference earlier in March, someone I believe from the IPQCC, I think the Institute for Patient and I'm getting all my acronyms confused. Anyways, there was a really powerful quote that said something along the lines of the pandemic did to NICU parents what the pandemic did to NICU parents, what the asteroid did to dinosaurs. And I think a lot of families are really feeling like we have a lot to come back from. And that I think resonated with a lot of us NICU families and people in roles like mine. You know, everything moved virtual. So, you know, on the fortunate side, at least for our family advisory committee, we moved to virtual quarterly Zoom calls. And surprisingly, we found there was increased participation. Our family caregivers were on Zoom providing feedback and hearing updates about the NICU during COVID in an increased way. But our subcommittees, sort of our working groups that met more regularly, we saw that participation sort of drop off. So less parents are available to join the monthly calls. We saw a lot of Zoom fatigue. I'm sure we're all experiencing the same. And we really had to do things like get really creative with emailing for feedback for documents and engaging them in different ways. And we're still working our way out of that hole, to be, transparent. I think, Marybeth was saying sort of something similar. This is hard work and it's not easy. And when it works for a little while, something may happen and you'll have to kind of start over again at the ground floor. But I'm grateful to have a community of family advisors who are enrolled similar like mine to pick their brains. So know that if you have questions and you're building a family advisory, you don't have to do it alone. There's tons of us who are doing it too, who, we may not have all the answers, but we can hopefully find you and work together to build these programs. So that's what I've got for today. I just wanted to say thank you again. Here's my contact information. And here's some pictures that bring me some joy. It's not easy, but I think it's so important. And, I think our families appreciate this work so much. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Molly. I think we're going to have several questions for you in the chat once we get to the Q&A session. So thanks so much. I'd like to also introduce our next speaker, Jennifer Johnson, who hails from my own institution, University of Rochester. So when you report for the news for 17 years in one city, the name TV News Lady is hard to shake, but it's one Jennifer Johnson embraces after a career as a television news anchor. Journalism is what brought Jennifer to Rochester, New York, but 3 years ago, she started a new career inspired by her late daughter, Grace. Grace was born very sick in 2011 and was not expected to survive. But because of the exceptional care she received, Grace lived almost 17 months. You learn a lot being the parent of a medically fragile child. Jennifer began advocating on behalf of patients and families and soon realized there was so much work to be done in this area that it could be a full-time job. Now, as the Director of Family and Community Outreach at the Children's Hospital that cared for Grace, UR Medicine, Gala Center Children's Hospital, Jennifer is working to bring the voices of families with diverse backgrounds, diagnoses, outcomes, and experiences into the decision-making process at the hospital. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer.
Thanks so much, Colby. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your time. Yes, I'm here on the East Coast as well, and I'm hoping that my youngest remembers when she gets off the bus today to go to the neighbors. So thinking that my doorbell won't ring, but if I have a Colby moment, if you will, please bear with me. And I just want to thank you guys too for dedicating this talk to our NICU kids. That was really beautiful. Grace would be turning 11 this coming Monday. And so any opportunity to see her voice and see her name on the screen is welcomed. So thank you. I needed that, sort of right about now. As Colby mentioned, I'm the Director of Family and Community Outreach, and I want to stress that there is no mention of NICU in my title. I am not NICU specific, and quite honestly, I wondered if I was really right for this talk, since my approach is very, very different. But then I kind of thought, you know what? Maybe someone will benefit from a very different approach. So bear with me, here we go. My responsibilities in this job are really threefold. Again, growing that army of diverse families to give feedback and support one another. And of course, that's what I'll be talking about today. But I'm also out in the community representing the hospital through speaking engagements, community engagement events, and fundraisers. And again, having been a journalist for 20 years, I still love to tell stories, and I still embrace the media. And so I also work with our medical staff to help them feel comfortable working with the media and social media, because we need educated voices on those platforms now more than ever. And I also work with our staff to create medical education videos like the one in the lower part of your screen there on the right. This is on our NICU website about how to fortify breast milk at home, which was identified by our NICU families through discharge surveys that Dr. Jeff Myers, who I believe is on this call today, one of the things that was important to him. And so identifying that on surveys, we thought, well, let's do something about that. And so we created this, simple video. It's about 5 minutes long, and families can watch it before they leave, and then they can access it on our website once they're home. So some of what I do, and so again, some of the work that I'm talking about is actually just a third of what I do. So as about our hospital, we're part of the University of Rochester Medical Center in Rochester, New York. Our children's hospital, upper right there, is an 8-story tower. It connects in a few places to our adult hospital. We used to be stuffed into the adult hospital, and then a few years ago, we built this beautiful tower. As for the NICU, it is our largest unit, 44 private NICU beds in our tower, as well as 24 beds in the adult hospital. That's like a NICU step-down unit, but most of those are individual family rooms as well. We're often at 100% capacity or more, and it's the only level 4 NICU in our region, so we kind of take all the kiddos on the unit. You could, next slide, please. So how did you build the Family Advisory Council or Family Partnership Council programs in your local NICU? Well, I didn't. Maybe I'm helping to rebuild them, you could say. So I want to give a huge shout out to our social work clinical manager, Carla Levant, who I believe is on the call today. She is a family-centered care pioneer and champion at our institution, especially in the NICU. In fact, what you're seeing on the left here is a poster that she presented in 2012. Carla and her small team, if any of them are on this call and I'm leaving you out, forgive me, but they really moved mountains to get things going at our children's hospital. And by 2009, they had created a family advisory council to gain parental input for the NICU's policies and procedures. Some of their successes, yes, I agree, Colby, she is amazing. Some of their successes include expanding parent visiting hours and allowing parents to stay in unit during rounds and shift changes, establishment of a parent advocate and peer support volunteer position. Yes, volunteer. We rely heavily on those at our hospital. I am paid, but so many of the people that we rely on for this work are volunteers. Improvements in discharge planning and follow-up, and parent participation on hospital committees for planning and quality. So Carla and the small team built this great foundation, for this work at our children's hospital, even bringing in Beverly Johnson, who we just mentioned, from the Institute for Patient and Family-Centered Care, to really take their work to the next level. And they were off to an incredible start. The momentum for this work kind of hit a little bit of, I don't want to say rocky ground, but sort of paused just a little bit when our larger hospital system that we're a part of, really seeing the importance of family-centered care, wanted to take over that care and sort of bring it system-wide. Don't get me wrong, a ton of the incredible work that Carla and her team established continues and carried on, like that Family Advisory Council that continues to have representation from all across the children's hospital, including the NICU. The NICU Advisory Council, that there is one, but to be honest, in my role, I don't know as much about that. I know Dr. Myers and Dr. Day are here, and I think Morgan Kowalski is here as well, and can probably answer a lot more about the status of the NICU Advisory Council. But another thing that, Carla inspired a strong, strong core of parents who have that lived NICU experience. They remain dedicated to our hospital. Pre-COVID, they would come on the unit in person and cold call, visiting with families, hosting family dinners once a month, and hosting scrapbook nights on the unit. It really is a robust effort, and my hat off to Carla and her team and everyone who helped build this great foundation that I got to help build on top of. But that time that I sort of mentioned when leadership of the effort was a little bit in limbo, sort of allowed then a little bit of this work to grow organically, if you will, which is really impressive, but not necessarily structured. Some pockets grew much better than others. So if you try to get a snapshot of what was happening in this realm across the Children's Hospital, that was kind of hard. And we know that tracking this work and producing data on it to measure its impact is important. We know keeping track of the parents involved in this work, in case, for example, the Joint Commission ever comes and says, hey, what are the qualifications of these folks? We know that's quite important, which actually happened this week to us. And we also know that, keeping track of the parents and how they're feeling about this work, again, it can bring up a lot of feelings about their own time there. Keeping track of them and seeing how they're doing, because we know that they're such valuable resources and we're really trying to tap into their input now more than ever. All of that is easily said to track all of this, but not easily done, especially with limited resources. So if we could go ahead and change the slide, please. I had actually no idea about any of this internal history that I've just shared with you. I didn't join the hospital staff until 2019. So yes, I'm experiencing a little bit of imposter syndrome right now, having just heard our last two speakers. But what I knew was after having a baby in the NICU in 2011 for 72 days and bringing her home on all sorts of medical equipment and managing her around the clock care at home, and then having her pass away at 1.5 years was really, really hard. And I say that as someone who is so privileged to have, a very supportive and dedicated spouse, a safe home, reliable transportation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all of those supports. I say that as someone who is privileged to be able to call up the head of our hospital at the time and tell her my thoughts on what went well with our care and what didn't go well with our care, and actually to see some changes happen from that conversation. And I say that as someone who was privileged to have gotten to know a lot of our hospital families and hear their ideas for change all across the hospital and not just the NICU. And honestly, I was happy in my other job as a journalist, but I had such an urge to do something with all of this information. And I was able to brainstorm this all into a full-time job, and working with the head of our hospital, a new head of our hospital who came in 2018. Again, we were able to put together this job in part because he's very encouraging of family-centered care. And by the fall of 2019, I was actually in place doing that job that we created. And that was actually the first time I was hearing the term family-centered care. I didn't realize that there was a term for something that I was finding was my passion, actually. So what were the next steps and what were the challenges for all of this? Well, after I started in this newly dreamed up job, Carla and I connected and tried to regain some of that momentum of that she and her team had really planted the seeds for, and really re-energized the effort. We identified that it'd be great to get more family advisors on the overall Family Advisory Council. We met with quality improvement teams and identified it would be great to get more families on the QI committees that already existed or were on a list to get started. Same for our public relations group, managing a marketing group and advancement teams who wanted more families who'd be willing to show up and share their story. And same for our new bereavement coordinator who wanted to infuse more parents into the work that she was doing. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We named this effort to incorporate more families into our work the Family Connection Program. And in late January of 2020, we brought a bunch of families together and told them all the ways that they could engage. And many of them signed up to engage in multiple ways. And this was really a dream come true to me, to really harness the power and insight of families. And then, of course, you all know what happened next, right? COVID. COVID was like, yeah, not so fast, right? So many of the engagement opportunities, of course, were put on hold. Families couldn't necessarily come in, and our staff was so busy, especially those NICU nurses that Molly gave a shout out to earlier. We're so busy just trying to figure out how do you care for people in a time of COVID. But as devastating as COVID has been, it really gave us the wake-up call and honestly the time to realize that we needed to build this program in a way that it could exist virtually, and actually a few other ways that have been important to me as well. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment. But first, I want to go over our engagement opportunities as they currently exist and are presented to all of our families, including our NICU families. So we can go ahead and change the slide, please. So it might be kind of hard to read on this screen, but I put together this chart, and actually there's a few other pages that list out not only the description of the opportunity, but the paperwork that's required, the training that's required, the time commitment that's involved, and who are the contacts for a lot of these work. But Quality Improvement Family Advisor, we have a CLABSI committee going, a NICU handoffs committee going, employee safety and patient behavior, that we have parents actively on right now. And I think they're seeing the fruits of having families involved. The next section there are buddy programs. We actually built this during COVID as a way for families with lived NICU experience who were at least 2 years out from that experience to be matched with a family that was currently in the NICU. And these connections were meant to be virtual. So we said, connect by text, phone, email, or a platform like Zoom, kind of like whatever works for you guys. And this has been a really big lift with now a 19-page handbook for our buddy mentors to follow as they onboard. But it has really caught on and is being replicated by our trach and ventilator program, as well as our G-tube program, with many more units interested in starting a buddy program, including our bereavement coordinator, who I'll talk about in just a moment. But our third graph there, sharing with the public, whether it is, again, speaking at a fundraiser like a golf tournament or a gala, or simply sharing a picture of your child who has a G-tube for our hospital social media as we celebrate, G-tube Awareness Month or something like that. A lot of families are wanting to share their story to help promote the good that happens at our hospital. So that's an opportunity for families to engage. Bereavement advisors, I mentioned the Future Bereavement Buddy Program. This group is, our other advisors are doing things like reviewing and standardizing what units give to families when a child passes away in the hospital, like a memorial box. Like if you lose a child in the NICU versus the PICU, there might be different things that families get. So they're looking into standardizing those things. We have our Family Advisory Council and family support there on the right. That I mentioned that strong core of NICU parents who cold call on the unit and host those monthly dinners and scrapbooking events before COVID. They've missed this work. They are itching to get back in our hospital physically, and I think are just getting the green light now. But we want to really expand this concept of support out of the NICU into other units. Like, for example, in our hospital, a lot of our oncology patients have great community supports, or our cardiac patients have great community supports. But maybe other patients, like, burn patients or orthopedic patients, maybe there aren't as many community supports. So maybe we could create those supports for them through involving families. So those are the engagement opportunities, and we're in the process right now, literally right now, of adding sort of this chart to our website so that everyone is aware of what these opportunities are and what it takes to be involved. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So what did COVID teach us about how we should build and run this program? And I think that they should exist in these ways. Really, what's important to me is that so much of this can run virtually, and that's both internally and externally. And what I mean by that is, externally, even after this pandemic is, hopefully over one day, fingers crossed, right? Connecting virtually instead of in person may be easier for families with medically complex kids or medically fragile kids. Of course, for families who live, far away and can't make that drive into the hospital for a meeting. Internally, many of us doing this work, myself included, are working from home. Space is at a real premium at our hospital. So the office that I used to have, I don't anymore at the hospital. I'm talking to you from my basement. So it's kind of hard to stay on the same page being in a lot of different places when you're really doing cross-disciplinary work. And so this has been a huge challenge because we already have a focus on meeting industry standards for the training and paperwork required of our families, while at the same time making it not too much of a burden that is a barrier for them to participate. So figuring out how that whole system can work and then how it can actually all work virtually, it's been a big lift, but I think one that is important to gather more voices of more families. This program, of course, needs to be HIPAA compliant as we talk about all of these, papers flying back and forth. It needs to exist in an equitable fashion, and it needs to reflect and meet our values. For example, diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So a little bit more kind of about what that means. The whole process of getting family advisors into our system will soon start online. So yes, we do want definitely recommendations from staff, but we also don't want it to be a barrier. We want anyone to be able to find us and be able to say, hey, I want to be a part of this. So this is a red cap form on the left where people can, give us their basic information, reflect on their lived experience and how they are actually interested in engaging in our system. And this also allows us to be able to track them within our system. And shout out to Dr. Myers, who helped me create this a long time ago, because that red cap can be a beast. The Canadian Premature Baby Foundation, it has this introduction to NICU peer support training that is online and in video form, and it is absolutely great. Again, Dr. Myers found this as well. You can access it anytime, and it covers empathetic listening and the importance of HIPAA to the hallmarks of our program. We have HIPAA document advisors signed to go along with that as well. And what do I mean by it existing in an equitable fashion? Well, not everyone, working from home like I am, has access to a printer, for example. So sending someone an attachment to print and fill out and then send back by snail mail may exclude some people. So it's also extra steps for already busy families to print it, fill it out, find a stamp. Who has stamps anymore? Go out to the mailbox, right? So we're trying to create forms that can be filled out online instead. For example, our public relations team, they need parents and guardians to sign this very specific HIPAA form before they say do an interview with the media, sharing their child's health journey or sharing a picture on our social media pages. So we're working on making this form electronic and looking to see if DocuSign might be an option that checks all of the privacy boxes. How about diversity, equity, and inclusion training? Many workplaces, mine included, require DEI training for employees, right? And we think it's important to bring this to our family advisors in a form that is tailored to them. A lot of us have to sit down and do like those hours-long stuff. Well, volunteers don't have time for hours-long stuff. So we created our own by working with our Office of Equity and Inclusion, as well as a grateful mom who happens to be a DEI consultant. And our hope is that this 1 hour virtual authentic advocacy and unconscious bias training is helpful as our advisors support a family that may be very different from them, or as they may be advocating for the diverse and beautiful families of our hospital through a place on a committee, for example. I'll be honest, not everyone embraced this unconscious bias training at first, but I'm happy to report that our first training session over the summer was a real success, and we actually have our second session happening next week. So then setting up a system to track all of these trainings and all of these paperworks. And honestly, right now, I kind of feel more like a virtual structural architect than someone who is actually connecting with humans on a day-to-day basis. So I'm excited to finally get all of this done and transition to actually, connecting with other parents and seeing how we can support parents face-to-face. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Did you have financial support, and how are you planning to sustain this? Well, I'm calling for backup. I'm calling for backup. Carla is my partner in crime on a lot of this, and we rely heavily on a former NICU mom who's a volunteer and an absolute saint to help with the day-to-day logistics and keeping track of all that paperwork I talked about. I have asked for a family connection program coordinator to be funded through our hospital's budget, which my boss, who is the head of the hospital, supports, but we're currently in a hiring freeze, so that's not an option. Another approach, our NICU, which has a lot of representatives here, is really looking to kick our family-centered care into high gear. So we've asked a NICU-focused donor to fund a position that will sort of head up the NICU-focused components of the Family Connection program that I've talked about, and many other NICU-focused projects, and we're hoping to hear back on that very soon. As for logistical support, we've connected with an office that tracks our on-site volunteers, like our in-person volunteers. And even though most of our Family Connection program advisors are engaging virtually, that office still has the capacity to track people. So we've been able to rope them in and help with some of this paperwork. And so how do you get buy-in from staff and physicians to engage in family-centered care? That's a good question. I am wrapping up, I promise. We have some staff that are all about family involvement, like Dr. Day, for example, Dr. Myers. And Dr. Day, thank you for the invite to talk today. But honestly, we do have other staff that I worry about when it comes to engaging with families, as sort of mentioned. Quality improvement, for example, can be looking at where your strengths aren't, which aren't necessarily easy to hear. And so human nature may mean that we become defensive, and I worry about that when it comes to staff and parent advisor interactions, because it takes a lot for a parent or guardian who maybe has been hurt by the system or doesn't trust the healthcare system to, choose to engage back into the system. So we really need those voices now more than ever. So we need to make sure that everyone's on the same page about the importance of this family-centered care and family-centered care from all types of families. We're also working on having Bev Johnson to come back to do a grand rounds and talk about, why is it important to have family-centered care? Why is it important to have diverse voices? Why do we need to hear this feedback? And where does our hospital stand in regards to this work? And hopefully by then in November, it'll be our chance to highlight this Family Connection program, which will hopefully be all online by then, so that everyone knows it as the one place to go for families to start their engagement journey in our hospital. And finally, on my last slide, like Molly, I just want to highlight the kids in our hospital and say thank you, because yes, like you, this brings me joy too. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Marybeth, Molly, and Jennifer for these amazing presentations and for your time. And of course, to Colby, Malathi, and Caroline for organizing this amazing session. I've just learned so much from all of you. I'm Ashwini Lakshman, and I'm the chair of our Education and Outreach Committee for CPQCC PQIP. And here with me moderating our Q&A is Courtney Broles, who's our Director of Quality and sort of the heart of all our CPQCC endeavors. So let's start with some questions we gathered from the chat as well as from registration. And please feel free for our audience to add more questions into the chat. We may not get to all of them, but at least we can have a record of some of the topics that you're interested in. So I'll hop right into it. Feel free, Molly, Marybeth, Jennifer, to take this one. What recommendations do you have for a counsel at a small, low acuity NICU, since the patients may not be staying for very long?
I can speak to that a little bit. Yeah, I actually think, and this is something that we've all talked about, I think, as family advisors as well, that the experience of the short stay NICU parent, while it may be very different from our longer stay families, I think that those families have such a different experience and are in they're in crisis in a totally different way, because they either got to the finish line or they got close to the finish line, and all of a sudden everything changed, and so they really are caught off guard. And so I think, one of the ways that we struggle in my unit to engage our late term and our late preterm families, we have an online portal called My NICU, and it's an incredible resource. But signing up for it is a huge barrier for this 20% of our families, because it's sort of an acknowledgement, like, if I sign up for this, that means that I think I'm going to be here, right? And so I think it's so important to recruit those voices and to even just reach out. I don't know if you have a discharge coordinator or somebody who, even if you add protected time, just a short amount of time, to reach out to those families and get their feedback on what may have made their experience better in their NICU. Would they, I think that a lot of our late preterm families would really benefit from mentors, because it's really scary in the NICU, no matter who you are. And one day in the NICU is too many. So I do think that it's so important to engage them. And I think having somebody who can reach out, whether it's in a parent advisor role or somebody on the staff that can create a network of them, making them feel welcome in the alumni community, I think is huge. I know that we always, in NICU communities talk like, there can be sort of a competitiveness about whose baby is sicker. And you really just want to make sure that everybody feels open and welcome in all of the spaces. And our NICUs are now increasingly seeing a patient population that is term, we have cooling babies, things like that. And so we really want to make sure that, it's about supporting everybody. So I do think that it's really important. You can start by just reaching out to them and asking them what they want, right? Because it's not about us telling them what they need. It's about us saying, what did you need while you were here with us?
Thank you, Molly. Hi, everybody. I'm Courtney. Great to be here, and thanks to you all. Next question was really a hot topic as people submitted this question. And although all three of you did discuss this question, I think we need to drill down a little bit deeper here so that we can really help teams be intentional and successful with this. So what tips do you have for recruiting or promoting diverse family representation on a council? I know Marybeth highlighted this in terms of reaching out to all NICU families to highlight various voices. Molly really gave a great example of the use of interpreters, providing concrete transportation for families, and then welcoming people from different backgrounds. And Jennifer, you did touch on it as well. So how can we really help folks concretely with this?
I think I'd like to start by saying that I haven't actually done a lot of recruiting yet, in part because I want to make sure that the environment that we are welcoming people into is ready to receive that. I think we've had maybe knee-jerk reactions in the past few years to go, oh my gosh, let's make sure our groups are diverse. And we can say that, but being ready to hear it and being ready to have an environment that really truly is welcoming to everyone. I think if you were to do that too fast, you would just find yourself maybe doing more harm than good. And then you're back, not even at square one, you're back even before that. Again, I worry about, making sure that our staff realizes the importance of these diverse voices, and letting our families who come into our system realize with this unconscious bias training that this is important to all of us. And it's a hallmark of our community. And so no matter where you are in that journey, we do want to at least make sure you have this baseline, because it's important for people to realize that everyone is welcome. And so I haven't even really gotten to the recruitment phase. I've more just been trying to set the tone to make sure it's one that's welcoming.
Jennifer, I think that was so well said. And I think it's really important to ensure that, when you do get to the recruitment phase, when we all get to the recruitment phase, that we're not just filling token seats. It's got to be meaningful work, and the follow through has to occur. So I really commend you for working on the culture, the prep on the front end of that. It's very important.
Thank you both. There is a question from our chat about stay in touch documents. If you have some examples, and what does that mean for how we can do that better as units?
So I think that was probably a reference to something that I mentioned in our talk. So we've actually phased out our stay in touch document because we have a dedicated discharge nurse now who calls families and checks in and asks, how they're, if they have appointments and follow up, things like that. She checks in, but she also asks if they would like to stay in touch with us. And then she asks for the best way. So we have usually an email contact, but that's definitely, we have a form that I'd be happy to share. I can send it to Malthi and to Colby to share with the group, but we, just something that sort of says, and I think, we had talked about at some point also, and I think I see a question in here from our NICU nursing director. I think Kathy's here talking about this as well. I think there's opportunity to even say, are you interested in subcommittee work? what about your experience, would you like to give back about? Like, are you more interested in craft night and giving back in that way? Or do you want to talk about chronic lung disease? So that's, I think, a really important piece of it. And I do a bit of that in our alumni community. We have so like when I recruit for families, I let them know what the kind commitment is. I say, like, this is a group that's going to meet on Tuesdays once a month from 3 to 4. There's going to be respiratory therapists. There's going to be, doctors. There's going to be nurses. There's going to be social workers, and sort of let them know what the landscape is a little bit so that they can decide what their comfort level is and if they're able to commit to it. Because I think one of the hardest parts about recruiting families to these types of subcommittees is you're like, are you interested in being part of it? And they're like, yes. And then you're like, great. What are you interested in? They're like, I would really like to do, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, great, that's on Thursdays. And they're like, I actually work at nights on Thursday, or whatever the case may be. So you really want to make sure that you're clear about what the time commitment is, because they're going to, not everybody is able to stay up to those commitments. And if they want to be a part of it, but they may not be able to, may not fit into their schedule, or it may only fit into their schedule for a year or two. And so sort of re-recruiting. I just was reaching out to we have a neonatologist who's the director of our family engagement, Emily Weitzel, who's a part of this committee, but couldn't be here today. And she and I were just talking, like, we need to re-engage families again, so I think that's a big piece of it, and ask them where their interests are and what they'd like to give back to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, the session has just flown by, and we have, lots of questions that have come up in the chat that we'll post to our Padlet, and maybe can continue the conversation there. So again, thank you so much, Molly, Jennifer, Marybeth, and of course, Colby, Caroline, Malathi, for all your hard work. On behalf of CPQCC, we just wanted to emphasize our commitment to families as a foundation of high quality inclusive NICU care, which was a topic of our Improvement Palooza in 2022. This is our QR code to join our CPQCC mailing list. And we look forward to continuing this work with all of you. And again, just so pleased to see all the engagement here today. So thank you. And I'll turn it back to Caroline, Malathi, and Colby.
Thank you, Ashwini. I want to thank our amazing speakers, Marybeth, Molly, and Jennifer, again for your great talk. And I hope everyone ready to take this into action. And so our task force webinars are usually every other month. So except we have one in October, just to add it on this topic. Thanks to Betsy for being vocal about including term and late preterm family partner. So that's the reason we created this webinar, and it's October 13th, and it's going to be late preterm and term family partner speakers, and as well as Dr. Patterson is talking about providing support to non-birthing NICU partners. So if you are in listserv, you probably received the calendar invite already. If you are not on, so you can just join our listserv, and or you can just fill out this evaluation survey about this webinar, and we appreciate your feedback, and that's how we can get better at improving on our future webinars. So thank you for joining, and we will see you all on October 13th at 11 a.m. Thank you, everyone.